Imagine you're in a committed relationship with someone who literally parted a sea for you, and somehow you still ended up swiping right on someone else. That is exactly what Israel did, multiple times, to the Most High. And today, we're going to talk about the 3 gods they left him for. Now, before you judge Israel too quickly, let me give you some context, because this isn't just a story about people being spiritually reckless. This is a story about temptation. You see, every single one of these gods offered something real, something Israel wanted. And that's what makes this story so uncomfortably relatable. Because we don't usually abandon our values for ugly things. We abandon them for things that look reasonable. So, let's meet the gods. God number 1, Baal. Now, Baal was technically the storm god. Think thunder, lightning, rain, all the works. But here's the thing, rain wasn't just weather back then. Rain was money. In an agricultural economy, no rain means no crops, and no crops means no food. No food means you get it. So when Baal worshippers said, "Hey, serve Baal and he'll send rain," what they were really saying was, "Hey, sign up for this package and watch your business grow." So Baal worship wasn't just religion. People were trying to get bread. And before you say, "That's ancient and irrelevant," how many sermons have you heard promising that God will bless your finances if you give enough at the offering? I'll wait. Now Baal goes mainstream when King Ahab marries Queen Jezebel. And Jezebel is a lot. She's Phoenician, she's bold, and she's basically the chief marketing officer of Baalism. Under her influence, Baal worship flourishes in Israel. We're talking 450 state-funded prophets of Baal on the royal payroll. Which brings us to Mount Carmel. One of the most dramatic scenes in the entire Bible. The prophet Elijah shows up. He looks at the 450 prophets of Baal and says, "Let's have a cook-off." 2 altars, 2 bulls, and whichever god sends fire from heaven to consume the sacrifice. That's the real God. The prophets of Baal go first. They pray, they dance, they shout. And Elijah starts trash-talking them. Maybe your God is on a journey. Maybe he's sleeping. Maybe he's busy. Because nothing happens. There's no fire, not even a spark. Then Elijah steps up, drenches the altar in water 3 times just to make it harder, and prays one simple prayer. Fire falls and consumes everything. The water, the wood, the stones, even the dust around the altar. The crowd goes wild. Baal is exposed. And here's the gut punch. Within 1 generation, Baal worship was back. That's how powerful the economic argument was. Israel kept going back because Baal felt practical, and faithfulness to God felt costly. Sound familiar? Okay, God number 2. Asherah. Now, if Baal was about the economy, Asherah was about something even harder to root out: home. Asherah was the mother goddess, goddess of fertility, family, daily life, and she showed up not in grand temples, but in kitchen shelves and bedroom corners. She was kept in small clay figurines found in ordinary Israelite homes. Archaeologists have literally dug up these figurines by the thousands in ancient Israeli sites. But here's where it gets really wild. Some of the ancient inscriptions they've found, they reference Yahweh and his Asherah, as in, Israel started treating Asherah as God's wife. They didn't even fully walk away from Yahweh. They just added her. Like, we still love God, we just think he needs a companion. But it gets worse. King Manasseh, one of the longest reigning kings in Judah's history, 55 years on the throne, takes Asherah worship and does something so audacious it would make your jaw drop. he takes a carved image of Asherah and places it inside the Holy of Holies. For context, the Holy of Holies was the most sacred room in the entire temple, the place where the presence of God dwelled. The room that only the high priest could enter once a year on the Day of Atonement. The room that was so holy that if you entered improperly, you could die. And Manasseh put a statue of another god in there for 55 years. And what's devastating about Asherah is precisely that she felt safe. She wasn't demanding war or conquest. She was about fertility and family and daily provision. She was the god that made faith feel comfortable, and comfortable faith, as Israel was learning the hard way, has a tendency to slowly replace the real thing. Okay, we've been having fun, but I need you to stay with me for this last one, because it gets dark. Because I think you need to understand just how far this logic can go. Molech was the god of Ammon, and what he demanded was simple, horrifying, and somehow followed a twisted kind of logic. He demanded children. Specifically, he demanded that parents sacrifice their children, burned alive, as payment. And in exchange, they'd secure Molech's blessing and protection. And this is where the story of Israel's idolatry reaches its most ultimate conclusion. Because remember how it started? Baal said, "Give me rituals, I'll give you rain." A transaction. Asherah said, "Give me your devotion, I'll bless your home." A transaction. And Molech said, "Give me your children, I'll give you everything else." The same logic, but taken to its ultimate limits. The Valley of Hinnom, just outside Jerusalem, is where this happened, a place called the Topheth. And scripture records that drums were beaten loudly during the sacrifices, but not for worship, but to drown out the screaming. And King Ahaz, a descendant of David, a man who should have known better by blood and by covenant, burned his own sons there. Scripture says God looked at this practice and said, "Nah, now this is too far." The Valley of Hinnom, or Gehenna in Hebrew, became in later years Jerusalem's garbage dump. A place so associated with fire and decay and death that by the time of Jesus, it had a new name in Greek, Gehenna. And the word Gehenna is the word Jesus uses more than any other for hell. That place where children burned because adults decided their ambitions were worth more than their own kids. So what happened when God got fed up with the Israelites? It got so bad that God left. The prophet Ezekiel records it. The glory of God, or what the Hebrews called the Shekinah, slowly lifted off from the temple, hovered over the threshold, then moved to the eastern gate, then rose to the Mount of Olives. And then it was gone. God left and took his glory with him. But here's where the story turns. 570 years later, a man walked into Jerusalem from the east, from the Mount of Olives. He rode down the same route the glory of God once departed through and entered the temple courts. He wept over the city. This man was Jesus. And in doing so, God was walking back. Jesus didn't announce it with a press release. He wept. Because returning to a place that had been broken by idolatry, returning to people who had traded presents for prosperity and comfort and transaction brought hope. When faith becomes transactional, when we approach God as a vending machine rather than a relationship, we've already started building an altar to Baal. So when our spiritual life gets so comfortable and domesticated that it costs us nothing, we've already carved an Asherah temple. And when we're willing to sacrifice what we love most for what we want most, we're standing in the Valley of Hinnom. When God's glory finally departed from that temple, when he lifted off the threshold and rose above the Mount of Olives and disappeared, He didn't leave because he stopped caring. He left because he refused to share a room with what Israel had put in there. And 570 years later, he came back. Not because Israel had figured it out. He came back before they understood who he even was. And he came back weeping. Which means the return was never about Israel's worthiness. It was about God's nature. The Israelites were not stupid people. They were people, like you, navigating real uncertainty, real fear, real hunger, real longing. And the gods they turned to offered something tangible, something with a faster feedback loop than trust and wait. That's what makes this hard. God doesn't always feel like the most efficient option at the moment. The altar of your career gives you a promotion you can see. The altar of approval gives you likes you can count. The altar of control gives you the illusion that you are not at the mercy of a universe that doesn't always make sense. And God asks you to trust anyway. So whatever altar you've been building, whatever God has slowly moved into the space that belongs to God alone, you are not already condemned. He can return. And he's asking if you'll let him back into the room. So will you? That's the question I'll leave you with. If you learned something new in this video, drop a like and subscribe for more videos like these.